Question 1, we have this equation. What value of n satisfies the given equation? So this is very simple algebra. You divide both sides by 2 and you get n equals negative 11. They're probably trying to trick you if you were to forget the negative sign. So the answer is going to be B, not C. Question 2, the ratio of trumpets to violins in a particular music class is 1 to 3. If there are 9 trumpets in the classrooms, how many violins are there? So you can probably do this in your head, but if you want to do this formally, I usually like to write out a proportion. And to me, going vertical makes more sense. So trumpets to violins is going to be 1 to 3. And then they're telling us there are 9 trumpets, and they want to know how many violins. Cross multiply, 3 times 9 is 27, divide by 1, x equals 27. Notice that you could also do this horizontally by saying trumpets to violins is 1 to 3, and then 9 trumpets, how many violins? The math is exactly the same. You're going to get x equals 27, and so the answer is D. So with proportions, just remember you can go vertically or horizontally. Just make sure that you are consistent. In other words, don't put the 9 down by the 3, and don't put the 9 over here under the 3. Question 3 and 4 have to do with this chart. It says albedos of various Earth surfaces. I have no idea what an albedo is, but we notice that it has a column of minimum albedos and maximum albedos for each surface. It says an albedo is the amount of light reflected from a surface divided by the amount of light falling on the surface. The amount is typically measured in watts per square meter. The table shows the minimum and maximum albedos for different types of surfaces on Earth. Question 3. Which of the following surfaces is the range of albedos the greatest? So really, we just need to look at each of these 4 choices, subtract the max minus the minimum, and see which one is the biggest. So metal, we have 19 minus 11, so that's going to be 0.08. Crop, 24 minus 16, also 0.08. Desert, 29 minus 26, 0.03. Snow, 84 minus 41, obviously the biggest, it's going to be 0.43. And so snow has the largest range, and that's going to be the answer. Question 4. In a desert region, the amount of sunlight falling on a surface with an area of 1 square meter is 1,000 watts. Which of the following could be the amount of sunlight in watts reflected from this 1 square meter surface? So the reason I underlined falling and reflected is because I remember that was part of the original equation. So let's look at it. It says an albedo is the amount of light reflected from a surface divided by the amount of light falling on a surface. So if I were to write that briefly, we're going to say reflected divided by falling, and that's going to give us the amount of albedos. In this particular situation, they want the amount of light reflected, and we know that the amount of light falling is 1,000, and it's in the desert region, so we have to look at the chart to see what the number of albedos is. From a quick glance, we see that desert is around 0.26 to 0.29, so technically that's going to be a range. I'm going to write 0.29 because that's close to 1/3. And now let's look at the answers. So just by glancing at this, we need something divided by 1,000 equals about 1/3. So you can kind of just eyeball that, and you know the answer is going to be A, because 275 is a little less than 1/3 of 1,000, which would be like 333. So that would make sense to give us a number like 0.29, and that's why A is going to be the answer. Notice you could also use 0.26, and you can eyeball it, and you get the same number. Question 5, the table shows the distribution by breed and sex of dogs that received the vaccine from a veterinarian during the month of July. So we got breed here, sex there. If a male dog that received the vaccine during the month of July is selected at random, so the total sample is going to be all the males, which is 10. What is the probability that the dog breed is Alaskan Malamute? Alaskan Malamute males are 6, so it's going to be 6 out of the total, which is 4 plus 6 is 10. 6 out of 10 is 0.6, and C is the answer. Question 6, we have a scatter plot. It says, of the following, which is the most appropriate linear model for the given data? So basically, we're going to assume that we can draw a line. It's not a very good line, and they want the equation. So keep in mind the equation y equals mx plus b is your standard form. We know that this line is going to have a negative slope because we've memorized that lines that tilt this way have a positive slope. Lines that tilt this way have a negative slope. Vertical lines have an undefined slope, and horizontal lines have a 0 slope. So given that it's a negative slope, x is going to be negative, so we're going to eliminate any choices with a positive x. That's choice A and choice C. And the y-intercept is the constant. It's obviously positive 7, so we're going to eliminate choice B because that would be negative 7. And so the answer is choice D, and if it were in standard form, we would write it y equals negative x plus 7. Question 7, the area of a square is 36 square inches. What is the length of one side of the square? So you can probably do this in your head because it's simply the square root of 36, which is 6, and B is the answer. If you want to see this, the area is 36. So formally, they're asking us what is the area of the square, which is side times side, or side squared equals 36. You take the square root of both sides, you get x equals technically positive negative 6, but since it's the length of one of the sides, it's going to be positive, and so B is the answer. Question 8, the graph shows the average heart rate for 15 people before, during, and after a period of strenuous exercise. The horizontal axis shows time in minutes, and the vertical axis shows the average heart rate in beats per minute. The exercise period began at 5 minutes, I'm going to mark that down here, and ended at 15 minutes. I'm going to mark that down right here. And that kind of makes sense because when they started exercising, their heart rate goes up. When they stopped exercising at 15 minutes, their heart rate started to go down. So the question is asking approximately how many minutes did it take after the exercise period ended, that would be after 15, for the average heart rate to first return to the average heart rate before the exercise period began. So the average heart rate before the exercise period began was about 70, and it returned to 70, looks like right over here at about 24 minutes. So they want to know how long did it take for that to happen after they stopped exercising, which is 15. So really, we're just doing 24 minus 15. It's going to be about 9 minutes, and the answer is going to be A. Question 9, Markel opens a bank account that earns interest at a rate of 2% compounded annually. She puts $200 in the account when she opens it and does not make any more deposits into or withdrawals from the account for 2 years. If the amount of money in the account after 2 years is given by the expression that, which of the following expressions gives the amount of money in the account after 1 year? So if you've memorized your equation for how compound interest works, you'll know that 200 is always the amount that you start with. And then given that the percent is 2, we're going to write 1.02. And the exponent over here is the number of years that we're calculating. Usually it's x if it's a variable. Here it's 2 because it's 2 years. The way we get 1.02 is if you have a 2% increase, we're multiplying by 1.02. If you had like a 10% increase, you would multiply by 1.10. A 15% increase would be 1.15. So let's go through each of these choices, keeping in mind that the original was 2 years. They want to know what's 1 year. So automatically I can look at this and I'm going to eliminate any choices where they change the initial amount, such as A and C. I'm also going to eliminate choice D because 1.01 would show an interest rate of 1%. So the only choice that's left is choice B, and the implied exponent here is 1, so that's why it works. And so that's the answer. Keep in mind the exponent is really telling us how many times are we multiplying 200 by 1.02. Because for every year, you're getting an increase in 2% added on to the original. And so that's what's going on. Question 10, 3x equals 8y, and both x and y are positive. Which of the following equals 40y? Now, you could just do this in your head, because if 3x equals 8y, and then we want to know how do we get to 40y, what did we do? We basically multiply the right side by 5. So you have to do the same to the left side. 3x times 5 is going to be 15x, and that's your answer. You could also do this more formally by setting this up as a proportion. And let's just put our unknown here. Cross multiply 3x times 40y is going to be 120xy. Then you then you divide by 8y, and you're going to get 15x as the quotient, and that's what's going to belong there. So either way you do it, both are correct, whatever is easier for you. All right, 11 and 13 refer to these equations. So when I look at these, I immediately see linear equations with different rates of change. One is 1n, one is 30n, and they have different y-intercepts, or different places that they start. So it says the given equations model the number of teachers and students in a high school from 2002 to 2017. In the equations, n is the number of years after 2002, where n is a whole number less than or equal to 15. The predicted number of teachers and students are T of n and S of n respectively. Makes sense. So let's see what the question says. Based on the model, how many teachers are predicted to be in the high school in 2017? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the top equation, T of n equals 80 plus n. They're asking us about 2017, and so n we know is the number of years after 2002. So in this case, n is going to be equal to 15. So we're going to say T of 15 is going to equal to 80 plus 15. T of 15 is therefore 95. And that means after 15 years, there's going to be 95 teachers. And so C is the answer. Very straightforward question. Number 12, which of the following is the graph of the function of S? So keep in mind, S of n was 1280 plus 30n. And we're thinking of our y equals mx plus b form because that's the equation of a line. So the first thing I'm going to notice is that our slope is going to be 30n. So that's automatically going to eliminate choice B because that has a negative slope. We'll keep choice A. I'm also going to eliminate choice D because a horizontal line is a zero slope. Now let's look at the y-intercept. The y-intercept is going to be 1280. Choice A looks about right, so we'll keep it for now. Choice C, the y-intercept is clearly 0, so that's not going to be right, and we're going to be left with choice A, which is the answer. Notice that in this problem, I didn't actually have to calculate whether the slope was 30n because based on the positive or negative of the slope, we can eliminate choices as well as based on the y-intercept. So this is a relatively easy problem. Question 13, based on the model, what is the first year in which the predicted number of teachers will be greater than 90? So keep in mind the teacher function is T of n equals 80 plus n. And they want to know when will this be greater than 90? So you can set this up by saying the total number of teachers here, 90. When is this going to be greater? 80 plus n, and we're trying to figure out the number of years when it's going to happen. So subtract 80 from both sides, and we find that n has to be greater than 10. And remember that n is the number of years after 2002. So the first year in which that's going to happen is really the year 2002 plus 10 is going to be 2012. But it has to be greater than 10, not equal to 10, so the answer is going to be B, 2013. Question 14, we've got these animals with mass and length. It says the table above shows the masses in kilograms and the lengths in centimeters of the largest known specimens of the 9 most massive types of turtles and tortoises. The mean mass of the 9 turtles and tortoises is approximately 331 kilograms. The mass of the algebra giant is closest to the mean mass, 360. Which of the following is true about the length of the algebra giant in relation to the median length of the 9 turtles and tortoises? So what this basically is telling us is that we can completely ignore the mass. It's just irrelevant information. They want to know what is the length of the algebra in relation to the median lengths. So we have to get these in numerical order. So I'm going to relist the 9. And it's going to be 81, the next biggest one is 95, and then 100, and 100, and then 140, 150, 187, 210, and 213. Given that there are 9 listed, the middle one is 140, so 140 is our median length, and they want to know what's the relationship of the algebra giant, 150, to the median. Let's go through it. It is the median length. Nope. Different numbers. 29 centimeters longer. Nope. 10 centimeters longer. Yes. 150 is 10 more than 140. 10 centimeters shorter. Nope. And so the answer is going to be C. So notice that they're really just trying to distract us with this average mass. Possibly they're showing it because they're showing the way that they want to do this calculation. Who knows? But I think it's more of a distraction. Question 15, this is actually 2 box plot and whisker diagrams because you've got your boxes here and your whiskers on the other side. The only thing you really need to know about a box plot and whisker diagram are the 4 or 5 values. You've got the minimum here. You've got your maximum here. This line in the box is your median. This line is your 25th percentile, or sometimes it's called the first quartile. This box is your 75th percentile, or sometimes known as the third quartile. So if you remember these 5 values, that's all you really need to know about box plot and whisker diagrams on the SAT. So let's see what the question says. Each of the box plots shown summarizes a data set, obviously 2 data sets. Data set A has a range of 130. That makes sense because the minimum value is 10. The maximum value is 140, so the range is 130. Data set B has a range of 80. Also makes sense because we're going from 80 to 160. If the 2 data sets are combined into one, what is the range of the combined data set? So really, the minimum and max values are not going to change when you combine them. The minimum is going to be 10, and the maximum is going to be the max in data set B, which is 160. So that's your range, 10 to 160. And so the actual range is going to be 160 minus 10 is going to be 150. So C is the answer. Question 16, at the beginning of a study, the number of bacteria in a population is 150,000. The number of bacteria doubles every hour for a limited period of time. During this period of time, or for this period of time, which equation models the number of bacteria Y in this population after X hours? So this is going to be a standard exponential growth, or very similar to a compound interest type of problem. You're going to start with your original number, which is 150,000. Notice all the equations have 150,000. And then it says it doubles every hour. So that tells me that I'm going to have to be multiplying 150,000 by 2. And really the only equation that does that is choice B. And then if it says every hour, it makes sense to put X as the exponent, because think about what's going to happen. You're starting with 150,000. After 1 hour, you're multiplying it by 2 because it doubles. After another hour, that whole number is going to double again, so you're multiplying it by 2. After another hour, this whole number is again going to double, so you're multiplying it by 2. So really what we've written out here is you're going to be multiplying 150,000 by 2 to the third power, because we were talking about 3 hours. And so that's why the X is in the exponent, or the number of hours is in the exponent. In this case, it was 3. So B is going to be the answer. And again, if you're totally confused by that, just do what I did. Take simple numbers of hours, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, and see if it makes sense. The other equations don't really follow any kind of standard form that you're ever going to see on the SAT. So I think they're really just throwing in random equations to confuse you. Question 17, we have a system of equations. It says if xy is a solution to the given system, which of the following could be the value of x? So in terms of solving this system, you can do substitution or elimination. Substitution might be easier for most people. So I'm going to substitute x minus 7 for y up here. That's going to be x minus 7 equals x plus 3 times x minus 7. You need a parenthesis there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see this as something times something equals something. I could then divide both sides by x minus 7. That's going to leave me with x plus 3 equals 1. And then I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and we're going to get x equals negative 2. What we find is that this is actually not an answer, and we're going to see why in a second. One thing I want to point out in this case, if you wanted to do elimination, 90% of times on the SAT, elimination means addition or subtraction. But in this case, you can actually divide 2 equations by each other. So if I said y equals x plus 3 times x minus 7 divided by y equals x minus 7, we're basically dividing the left side by the left side and the right side by the right side. Y divided by y equals 1. X plus 3 times x minus 7 divided by x minus 7, we eliminate, or we divide out the x minus 7s, so we're left with x plus 3. Gets us to the same position we're in right here, but we're still left with an answer that doesn't make sense. So always remember that when it says which of the following means we can plug in the answer choices. So let's take this original equation right here, plug in each of these answers and see what we get. So negative 7 minus 7 equals negative 14 equals negative 7 plus 3 is going to be negative 4 times negative 7 minus 7, negative 14. Obviously that's not going to work, so A is out. Choice B, negative 3 minus 7 is going to give us negative 10. That's going to equal negative 3 plus 3 is 0 times negative 3 minus 7, negative 10. So 0 equaling negative 10, not going to work. Choice C, 3 minus 7 is negative 4 equals 3 plus 3 is 6 times 3 minus 7, negative 4. Obviously doesn't work as well. Choice D, 7 minus 7 is 0 equals 7 plus 3 is 10 times 0. And choice D actually works because 0 equals 0. So what this illustrates, and this is probably why they're giving the problem, when we divided both sides by x minus 7 right over here, we were assuming that x is not equal to 7, because otherwise you'd be dividing by 0, which obviously you can't do. They're telling us in this particular situation, one of the solutions is x equals 7, and so that's why it works. But this is kind of an interesting problem that I think they put in just to kind of throw you off when you got x equals negative 2, and then you realize, hey, it doesn't work. But again, on the SAT, like many times, just plug in the answers and you'll probably figure out what's going on. Question 18, the speed of a lightning bolt is approximately 320 million feet per second. What is the speed in yards per minute? So let's take a note. We're looking at feet per second. So I'm going to write that down. 320 million feet per second. And they want yards per minute. So the way to do these types of problems is by simple unit conversions. And the easiest way to do that is by multiplying it by something that's equivalent. So what do I mean by that? So let's take feet. Feet we want to turn into yards. So we know that there's 1 yard, or there's 3 feet in 1 yard. So given that fact that I have feet on top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put feet on the bottom and yards on the top, and 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. So that's going to be my conversion factor, because what's going to happen is the units can actually cancel out. And the other thing we want to change is seconds to minutes. So we'll do the same thing. Seconds is down here, so we're going to put it up here. And we're going to put minutes down here, because that's what we want. At the end of the day, we want yards per minute. How many seconds in a minute? 60. So that's going to be our conversion factor here. So when you multiply this out, seconds are going to divide out, feet are going to divide out, and notice you're left with yards per minute. So really, you're going to do 320 times 60 divided by 3, and when you work that out, it's going to be 6,400, and you're left with yards per minute, and that's why the answer is going to be choice C. This is very similar to when we convert degrees to radians. So remember, if you're converting like 30 degrees to radians, you're really multiplying it by a conversion factor, which is pi radians is equal to 180 degrees. And when you multiply that out, 30 degrees, you know, is pi over 6 radians. And to go in reverse, you do the opposite. Pi over 6 times 180 degrees over pi radians. Radians cancel out, and you go back to 30 degrees. So the idea is that conversion factors are really multiplying whatever your original is by the number 1, because there's pi radians in 180 degrees, so it's an identity, just as there are 3 feet in 1 yard. So you're really multiplying by the number 1 in a sense. Question 19, we have a function. It says the number of students enrolled in a certain university t years after 1969 can be modeled by the function s, for t is anywhere between 0 and 33. The constant term, 10,268, is an estimate for which of the following? So the first thing I'll notice is that by looking at the function, 10,268 is the constant, so that means when t equals 0, these two terms will drop out. So that means s of 0 equals 10,268 exactly. So what is s of 0? Well, 0 is t, which is the number of years after 1969. So what this is saying is that in 1969, the number of students enrolled is 10,268, and that leads us to choice A. Visually, you'll recognize that this equation is a parabola, and the 10,268 is going to be the y-intercept, because when x or t is 0, that's when it crosses the y-axis. So it's going to look something like this, and our starting point here, t equals 0, or 1969, is going to be about 10,000. So let's look at the other answer choices real quick. Choice B, the number of students enrolled in 2002. Well, 2002 is exactly 33 years after 1969, and so the number of students enrolled is going to be S of 33. Now, when you plug in 33 for t, you square that, multiply it by 158, you're going to get a number that's much bigger than 10,000. Regardless, it's not going to be exactly 10,268, so B is out. C, the number of additional students enrolled each year. So this one, it should be clear that as t increases, say s of 1 or s of 2 or s of 3, what's happening is that you're plugging in 1, 2, and 3 for t. You're not going to be increasing by 10,268 each time, because that's going to be there every single time in the function. You're going to be increasing by some like strange number. So C is out. D, the maximum number of students enrolled in a single year from 1969 to 2002. So my guess is the maximum number of students is going to be S of 33 based on the way this function looks. And if you're not convinced, you can calculate where the midpoint is going to be by doing negative b over 2a, which is going to be 771 divided by 2 times 158. It's going to be about 2.5. So that tells you that the x-coordinate of the vertex is 2.5. If we start at 0, we take only 2 to get to the vertex. By the time we hit 33, we're going to be way up here somewhere. So it seems that once we get past 2.5, the number of students is going to keep increasing. It's certainly not going to be 10,268, and so choice D is out. Question 20, a company found that the average customer rating of a certain product can be used to estimate the total income from that product. According to the equation, y equals 44x plus 500. So the first thing that I'm thinking is that this is obviously a linear equation, and that kind of makes sense. Obviously, the higher the rating, the higher the income from the product would be. And it says y is the income in dollars, x is the average customer rating. Which of the following best describes the slope of the graph of the equation in the xy plane? So when we're looking at it real quick, we see that the slope automatically is 44 over 1. So visually, what this means is that we're looking at actually a very steep line, where if you were to draw the slope, which is rise over run, your rise would be 44, your run would be 1. So what that means is that every time your customer rating goes up by 1, your average income is going to go up by 44. And if you look at the choices, the only one that makes sense is choice D. So let's go through the other ones and see what they're saying. Choice A, for every increase of 44 in the average customer rating, the estimated increase in income is 500. So that would mean that your slope is going to be 500 over 44, but that's clearly not what's going on here. B, for every increase in 1 in the average customer rating, the estimated increase in income is 544. So that would mean that your slope is 544 over 1x. X would go here also in terms of the equation. Choice C, for every increase in 1 in the average customer rating, the estimated increase in income is 500. So that would mean your slope is 500. So it would be 500x. And A, B, and C would all be true regardless of what your y-intercept is. The y-intercept really basically means, I kind of drew it incorrectly here, but if your y-intercept is about 500, that's right about here, that means at a customer rating of 0, which is right on the y-axis, you're going to get an income of 500. So that basically just says where you're starting off. Question 21, we have a system of equations. How many solutions does the system of equations have? So what I'm going to do, like normally, is use elimination, because typically in the SAT, that's the most useful. I'm going to subtract the first equation from the second. So I'll rewrite it here, 4x minus y equals 3 minus 2x minus y equals 3. And so 4x minus 2x is 2x. Negative y minus negative y is like plus positive y, so that's 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. And divide both sides by 2, we get x equals 0. So the answer is going to be exactly one solution. Now, the reason that this is a question 21 is when you first look at it, you might be tempted to do substitution. What I mean is you might want to substitute 4x minus y for 3 and really set them equal to each other. Since they're both equal to 3, therefore 2x minus y is going to be equal to 4x minus y. So let's look what happens when you do that. We add y to both sides, we get 2x equals 4x, and then we divide both sides by x, and we get 2 equals 4, which is a contradiction. So that might tell you that there are no solutions, but keep in mind, when we divided by x, we were assuming that x is not equal to 0, which was the very solution that we found when we used elimination. So I think that they put this question here because they might have figured that a lot of people would do it this way, get a no solution, but forget that when you divide by x, you have to assume that it's not equal to 0, and that's the very solution that makes this problem work. So they're trying to be tricky. My main advice in these types of problems where they're asking about 1 or 2 or 0 or infinite solutions is do it multiple ways, and we've seen that before, and then you won't get tripped up. Question 22, the graph of y equals r of x is shown in the xy plane. It is clearly a parabola, and it says if a, b, and c are positive constants, which of the following could define the function r? So glancing at this, what I'll notice is that my parabola is in the vertex form. Now the vertex form of a parabola is something you should have memorized. It's going to be y equals a times x minus h plus k, and that means that the vertex is actually h comma k. So knowing that, you're actually going to be able to zero in on the parabola very quickly if you know the properties. So what are the properties that are useful? Number 1, that's the vertex. Number 2, if a is positive, then the parabola opens upward. If a is negative, then the parabola opens downward. So in this particular problem, we know that a itself is positive. So by putting a negative in front of it, we're making the whole form negative. So a and b are okay, and we can eliminate choices c and d because this particular parabola opens downward, which means this coefficient has to be negative. Next, the difference that we'll notice is the b term. So we know that c is positive because the vertex, this point right here, is going to be b comma c. And when we look at it, we automatically know that choice A is the answer because in choice B, by writing x plus b, that's the same as writing x minus negative b, which would mean that the vertex is going to be negative b comma positive c following this form. So basically, if you knew your vertex form of the parabola, you can get this problem pretty easily. Question 23, we have this expression. It says, which of the following is equivalent to the expression above for x is not equal to rad 2? So the reason they're saying x is not equal to rad 2 is because then you'd have this thing divided by 0, which would make the expression undefined. So they kind of have to take care of that. Now, when I'm looking at this, automatically, I'm thinking something that I've memorized, which is the difference of two squares. So a squared minus b squared is going to equal a plus b times a minus b. Now, that might not strike you as two squares because 2 is not a perfect square, but 2 is actually a perfect square if you consider rad 2 an integer. So what do I mean? Use this formula and apply it exactly as you see it here. So x squared minus 2 is actually going to become x plus rad 2 times x minus rad 2. And that works out really nicely because look what you have on the bottom, x minus rad 2. and then these two terms divide out. You're left with x plus rad 2, and D is the answer. But when I was looking at this, the reason that I was thinking the difference of two squares is because right underneath the 2, I saw the rad 2. And then I was like, oh, that kind of looks interesting. Another way you could have done this, if you didn't think of that, is just substitute any value for x because it has to be true. So what's the easiest value? Substitute 0. You're left with 0 minus 2 over 0 minus rad 2. That becomes 2 over rad 2, and then if you wanted to rationalize this because it doesn't really look like anything, you're going to multiply top and bottom by rad 2. So top becomes 2 rad 2. Rad 2 times rad 2 is 2. The 2's divide out, and you're left with rad 2 by itself, which when x equals 0 leaves D as the answer. So that's another way to do it. Question 24, which of the following represents the positive number r increased by 5%? So this is percent increase and percent decrease. This is something that you really should just have memorized on the SAT. I know that if I'm going to increase something, a price or a value by 5%, to get the new value, I'm going to multiply by 1.05, and that's choice C. The way this works is you guys should know that if you multiply r times 0.05, that's going to give you 5% of that value, and then you'd have to add it back onto the r to get the new value. So multiplying by 1.5 is really just a shortcut, because if you think about it, 1.05 is the same as 1 plus 0.05. If you distribute it, you get 1 times r plus r times 0.05. So what you're doing is you're taking the original value and you're adding 5% of that value, and you're doing it in one step. So very quickly, let's say you want to increase by 10%. You want to multiply r times 1.1. That'll give an increase in 10%. An increase in 25%, you're going to multiply r times 1.25. An increase in 3% is going to be r times 1.03. An increase in 3.5% is going to be r times 1.035. Percent decreases work the same way. Let's go down by 10. You're actually doing 1 minus 10%. So you're going to say r times 0.9. Because if you think about it, you're left with 90% after subtracting 10%. We're going to go down by 25%. That's going to be r times what's 1 minus 0.25. It's going to be 0.75. Down by 3%, it's going to be r times 0.97. Down by 3.5%, it's going to be r times 0.965. So glancing at the answer choices, you can see exactly what's going on. Choice A would give you 5% of r, but not the new price after you add it back on. Choice B would give you a decrease in 5% with the new price. Choice D would actually give you 5 times the original price, which is actually the equivalent of a 500% calculation of R. Notice that it's not a 500% increase, because a 500% increase added onto the original would actually be 6R. Regardless, D is out and C is the right answer. Question 25, we have a table. It says, what is the median of the data set summarized in the frequency table? So a frequency table basically just tells you how many values or how many times each of these values occurs in the set. So if they want to know the median, we have to list it in order and then find the middle entry. So the easiest way to do this is first find the total number of data points or numbers, and we have to add up the frequencies. So 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 2 is 7, plus 3 is 10, plus 7 is 17. So there's a total of 17 values in this set. Now what is the middle of 17? Just think of if there were 16, you would be able to divide the set into 8 and 8. So that means in a set of 17, the middle is going to be the 9th value. So we don't actually have to write out everything. We just have to write out everything up until we get to number 9. So let's do that manually. So 1 occurs 1 time, 2 occurs 4 times, 3 occurs 2 times, 4 occurs 3 times. And what you'll notice is if you were counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, The 9th value in this data set is a 4, so that's what the median is. Question 26, an airplane uses approximately 5 gallons of fuel per mile flown. If the plane has 60,000 gallons of fuel at the beginning and flies an average speed of 550 miles per hour, which of the following functions estimates the amount of remaining fuel t hours after the trip began? So if you're totally confused by this, probably the easiest way is to plug in a number for t and then see what your calculation is and then see which answer choice matches up. So I'm going to do that real quick. Let's assume for argument's sake t equals 1. So that means we have flown 1 hour, and at the end of the day we want to know how much fuel is remaining, so we have to figure out how far we went and how much fuel we used. So after 1 hour we've gone 550 miles, and knowing that we use 5 gallons per mile, we're going to do 550 times 5, which is going to give us 2750. And that's the amount of gallons of fuel that we've used. And since we started off with 60,000 gallons, we're going to do 60,000 minus 2750. And automatically that should tell you that choice D pops out as the answer, because that's exactly what the calculation you're doing when t equals 1. Now, keep in mind that when you're picking a number, you actually have to test out all 4 choices, but just by looking at it, obviously neither A, B, nor C is going to give you the same value as choice D, so you can be sure that that's the answer. Now, if you want to do this the real way, which is worth knowing, keep in mind what they want you to do is they want you to relate time to the number of gallons directly. So what do we have so far? We know this plane flies 550 miles per hour, and we also know that we have 5 gallons of fuel per mile, so 5 gallons per mile. If I multiply these two numbers together, notice my miles units are going to cancel. That's going to give me 2750 gallons per hour. So this number is actually meaningful because it tells us how many gallons of fuel we're burning per hour. So once you know that we're burning 2750 gallons per hour, and they want to know how much fuel is remaining, again, the answer becomes obvious because you're going to do 60,000 minus 2750 per 1 hour. So if you stick a t there, whatever t is, you're multiplying that amount of fuel by the number of hours. So that's why choice D is the answer. So this was kind of the real way to do it. Again, plugging in numbers is good as long as you're careful and you pick easy numbers. But either way, whatever's faster for you, that's the best way to do it. Question 27, we have a quadratic with an unknown b. For the quadratic equation shown, b is a constant. If the equation has no real solutions, which of the following must be true? So the way that you do this is you have to use the discriminant. What is the discriminant? Remember, the quadratic formula is negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now the important thing to remember is this is an equation which represents the roots. We're actually looking at 2 expressions. One is if you add this whole bunch of mess, and the other is if you subtract it. So what that means is that whatever's inside the radical is going to determine the nature of your roots. Because if b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, we're going to have 2 numbers that are generated from this expression. So that means we're going to have 2 real roots. The numbers are going to be real. They might not be rational, but at least they're real. If b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, we're going to have the square root of a negative number, which is going to give us 2 imaginary roots. And if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, this whole term is going to drop out. We're just going to be left with negative b over 2a. And that means we're going to have 1 real root. Visually, what this means is that 2 real roots is your parabola is going to cross the x-axis in 2 places. 2 imaginary roots means it's going to be off and not crossing the x-axis. 1 real root means your parabola is going to intersect at exactly the vertex, which is why you should have memorized negative b over 2a is the formula to get the vertex. It's basically the same as a quadratic formula without this other term. So knowing that you've memorized the quadratic formula and the discriminant, let's write it out. B squared minus 4ac. And for it to have no real solutions, it's got to be less than 0. So b, we still don't know what it is, so we're just going to write it. B squared minus 4. A is 3 in this case, and c is 5. So that's all less than 0. So what we have is b squared minus 4 times 3 is 12 times 5 minus 60 less than 0. Add 60 to both sides. B squared is less than 60. And notice we don't even have to calculate what b is because they sort of save us the work. And that means A is the answer. Question 28, lines Q and R in the xy plane are perpendicular and intersect at the origin. If line R passes through 1K, what is the equation of line Q? So initially you might think that we don't have enough information, but we actually do. The things that we want to keep in mind is perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. Line R, knowing that it passes through the origin and 1K, we have enough information to get the equation of line R. And then once we get the slope for line Q, we also have a slope plus a point, namely that it passes through the origin. That's also enough to get the equation of the line. So let's do that and see what happens. So line R, we know passes through the origin and point 1 comma K. Let's get the slope. Change in y over change in x is going to be k minus 0 divided by 1 minus 0. So the slope is simply k. Now that's line R. So that means line Q, the slope is going to be negative 1 over k. And thinking back to y equals mx plus b form, what's nice here is that the y-intercept is going to be 0 because it passes through the origin. So the equation is simply going to be y equals negative 1 over kx plus 0. And so that leaves us with choice B. So the general principles that you have to keep in mind for this problem is number 1, perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. And you also want to keep in mind what is the fundamental information that you need to get an equation of a line. So we saw that with line R, we just had 2 points. That was enough to get an equation. With line Q, we had a slope and 1 point. That was also enough information to get an equation of a line. So if you know what you need exactly for the goal, then you should be good. Question 29, it says, in the figure above, the circle has center O. What is the area of the shaded region? So for questions like these, you want an overall strategy. My overall strategy is going to be the area of the sector. So I'm going to write that out. Minus the area of the triangle. So what is the area of the sector? We can simply do a fraction of the entire area of the circle because this is 60 degrees out of 360, and the area of a circle is pi r squared, so that becomes pi 4 squared is 16. Now what is the area of this triangle? This triangle I know is equilateral because that's a radius, and given that this is 60 and these two angles are congruent, these two angles are also 60 and this length is 4. So we're looking at an equilateral triangle whose side is 4. If we want to do area equals 1/2 base times height, when we draw the altitude, the base becomes 2. What is the height? Something that you should know is when you divide an equilateral triangle in half, you get a 30, 60, 90 triangle. 30, 60, 90 triangles, I've memorized. It's 1, rad 3, 2. So in this case, my 1 is going to be 2. My hypotenuse is 4. So what's the middle value? 2 rad 3. So 2 rad 3 is going to be the height of this triangle. So now we can get the area. The area of my equilateral triangle is 1/2 base, which is 4, times height, which is 2 rad 3. There is a formula for the equilateral triangle, by the way, if you've memorized it. I have not, so I resort to using 30, 60, 90 triangles. Keeps the number of things that I've memorized to a minimum. All right, so when you actually do the math, this becomes 8 pi over 3 minus, on this side, we get 4 times rad 3. And notice what they've done is they've factored out a third from each of these, so we can do that very easily. 1/3 is going to leave us over here with 8 pi. And here, if we're dividing 4 divided by 1/3 is going to be 12. So that's going to be 12 rad 3. And therefore the answer is going to be choice D. Question 30, a survey asked a class of 30 students how many siblings they have. The number of students who have one sibling is 3 times the number of students n who have 2 or more siblings. If 6 students have no siblings, which of the following equations represents this situation? So first I'm going to show you the real way to do it because it's fastest, and then I'm going to show you the sort of using the answers way to do it, and also point out why this problem, I think they intentionally wrote it in a way to trick people. So the easiest way to do this is to realize that, hey, we have 6 students who have no siblings. So we're going to write 6 students who have no siblings. We have n students who have 2 plus siblings. And then we have 3n students, or 3 times that number, who have 1 sibling. So 1 sibling is 3n. And the total we know is 30. So it's really going to be 6 plus n plus 3n equals 30. And when we combine the n's, we get 6 plus 4n equals 30. And so the answer is C. Now, the reason I say that this problem is actually pretty evil, because you might be thinking initially, hey, why don't I plug in a number for n? Because typically on SAT problems, if you've got n's in the answer choices, you can actually pick any number for n and it should work. But what you'll notice is that the way the problem is set up, n can only be one number, and you realize that because all the answer choices actually give you a specific value for n, but it's just written in a way that makes it look like it's not. So what do I mean? Let's go through the choices and you'll see what I mean. So this is going to be if we weren't able to figure out this equation over here, and we're trying to solve the problem going backwards, we're basically going to see which value for n makes the statement or the problem true. So let's do this. Let's solve for n. 30 minus 6 is 24, and 1/3 of n equals 24. Therefore, n in this case is going to be 72. So let's solve for n first. 30 minus 6 is 24. 3n equals 24. N equals 8. Number 4. 4n equals 24, n equals 6. Letter D, 6n equals 24, n equals 4. Now remember, our n is the number of students who have 2 or more siblings. So what are the number of students who have 1 sibling? It's 3 times n. Automatically A is going to be out because we know 72 can't work. So we have 8 students who have 2 or more siblings. Multiply that by 3. We get 24 who have 1 sibling. Here, 6 times 3 is 18 who have 1 sibling, and 4 times 3 is 12 who have 1 sibling. And for all of these, 6 is a constant. So we have 6 students who have no siblings. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these numbers together. We're going to see which one gives us 30. That should tell us the answer. So 8 plus 24 is 32, plus 6, 42. 6 plus 18 is 24, plus 6, 30. And 4 plus 12 is 16, plus 6 equals 22. So the only value for n, because really that's what the answer choices are giving us, that keeps everything in this problem true, in this case the total of 30 students, is going to be choice C. Question 31, we've got this scatter plot. It says the scatter plot shows the percentage of flights with delayed departures and the percentage of flights with delayed arrivals by departing airport. So that's seen here and here, for 10 US airports in a certain 1-year period. So each of these dots is presumably an airport. A line of best fit is also shown for how many of the 10 airports was the percent of flights with delayed arrivals less than predicted by the line of best fit. So really the only thing they care about is the arrivals, which is the y-axis, and they're saying how many was the number less than predicted by the line. So really what we're doing is we're just going to count how many are under the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's the answer. Very easy problem, just you have to know what's going on when you look at a scatter plot. Question 32, the points in the figure lie on the same plane. ABF is congruent to EDG, that's the 2 triangles we're looking at. A corresponds to E, so that means E is going to be 65 degrees, and B corresponds to D, so that means D is going to be 75 degrees. What is the measure in degrees of GCF? All right, so we know that these are congruent. These two match. That means angle G is going to correspond to angle F as far as the triangles go, and this is 40. So then all we have to do is take away 180 minus 40 plus 40, which is 80. That gives us 100 for this angle in here, and that's the answer. So very easy problem. I'm wondering if they've given us a little bit too much information here, but given that this is 32, probably not. Question 33, the graph of the equation y equals mx plus b, m and b are constants, is shown in the xy plane. What is the value of m? So basically you should know that m is always the slope in slope-intercept form. To find the slope of any line, you can literally pick any 2 points and calculate rise over run. So what are the easiest points? I'm going to stick with positive numbers. So we're going to go this point to this point. So slope equals rise over run. What is rise? 5 minus 2 is 3. The run is 2 minus 0 is 2. Therefore, the slope equals 3/2, and that's going to be the answer. Notice if you picked a different set of points, because the line is constant, you're still going to get 3 over 2. So let's say I picked this point here and this point here, and then I did rise over run. The distance from 2 to negative 4 is 6. The distance from 0 to negative 4 is 4. So 6 over 4 is the same as 3 over 2. And by the way, since the line is tilting this way, it's going to be positive. When you work out the numbers, they'll work out to be positive also, which is why I stuck with these numbers up here. And that's really it. Question 34, eye spot is a disease in corn that is caused by a fungus. An agricultural researcher investigated whether the presence of eye spot necessitated the treatment of cornfield using a fungicide. The table shows the relationship between the presence of eye spot in cornfield and the need to use a fungicide. So what you'll notice about this table is that you add up the columns going across, that's how they get the total. You add up the columns going down, that's how they get the total. So according to the table, what fraction of the cornfields where an eye spot was observed needed fungicide? So we're only looking at this row. The total is 40, and they're asking what fraction of that needed fungicide. So the one that needed fungicide was 30, so it becomes 30 out of 40, or 3 out of 4, and that's the answer. Question 35, the line graph shows the total length in miles of major commercial railroad tracks in the United States from 1916 to 1976. So we got the length on the y-axis and the years on the x-axis. The average rate of change in miles per year of the total length of major commercial railroad tracks from 1916 to 1926 is m. What is the value of m? So really, we're only caring about these 2 points right here. And they're saying the rate of change, they're defining it miles per hour. That's basically the same as the slope, because miles is on the vertical and hour and years or time is on the horizontal. So the way we calculate this is it's going to be change in y over change in x. 421,000 minus 397,000 all over your change in x, which is 1926 minus 1916. When you calculate that, you're going to get 2400, and that's what's going to be the answer. So really, just like the other problem, we were calculating rise over run just for that small area. And notice the difference between this problem. This is not a constant line. In other words, the rate of change actually changes from years to years. Question 36, it says a painting crew painted a total number of 20 houses in July. In August, the number of houses the crew painted was 20% more than the number of houses in July. What fraction of the total number of houses the crew painted in July and August was painted in August? So we have to figure out how many houses were painted in August. Automatically, if they say they painted 20 in July and 20% more in August, I'm going to multiply that by 1.20, as we discussed before. That's going to give you 24. And now they're asking what fraction of the total in both July and August was painted in August. So 24 over July plus August, which is 20 plus 24. That's going to become 24 over 44. And when you reduce that, it's going to be 6 over 11, which is the answer. Question 37, a car was listed with a sale price of $12,000. The price was decreased by P% to 9,600. What is the value of P? So easiest way to do this is first let's figure out what P was and then figure out what percent is that of 12,000. So 12,000 minus 9,600. Do that on your calculator. You're going to get 2,400. And then we want to know what fraction out of 12,000 is 2,400. So divide that, you're going to get 0.2, which is 20%, and that's the answer because P is already seen as a percent. So you don't have to, bubble in 0.2. Just be careful about that. Question 38, we have a system of equations. It says for the system of equations above, what is the value of the product, blah, blah, blah. All right, so these are nasty numbers. What I'm going to notice is that we really only have two terms. We got this 1/3 t plus 5, which is repeated here and here. We got this 1/2 of u minus 4 repeated here and here. So I'm going to make my life easier by saying a plus b equals 37. And down here, a minus b equals 19. Why do I do that? Because notice we never actually have to find t or u. What they're looking for is already in terms of these ugly numbers. So let's just use a and b instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these two equations together because I want to eliminate b. So I get 2a equals 37 plus 19 equals 56. Divide both sides by 2. A equals 28. And when you calculate b, if a is 28, then b is going to be 9. Just looking at the second equation. And what are they asking for? Really, a times b. So at the end of the day, ab is going to equal 9 times 28, which is going to equal 252. And that's the answer.